What's going on, Tamers? It's me, man who is just at the cusp of achieving his champion level beard. Problem is it's just so much now. Oh, it feels good. Anyway, the first week of tournaments for the BT11 Dimensional Phase set has wrapped up, and I want to take a look at some of the results, where I think that a lot of the metas week 1 are kind of wishy-washy. There's like stuff all over the place. This time around, I think the meta is headed in a clear direction, and it's very, very obvious from these first week of results, so let's dive right into it. Taking a look at the actual results here, I think that the most telling story here is the rise and the power of Black War Greymon X Antibody. The deck has, it's hard to see it from here, but the deck has nearly 3 times the amount of wins as the next deck right under it, which is the Crossheart list. And I mean, 19 wins versus the next best deck having only 7 is very, very telling in the first week of a game's meta. Hades Force being able to just wipe out Crossheart boards and Tamers is very, very powerful, and the results here definitely prove that it is a wild card to include in your decks. The interesting thing about the Black War Greymon X deck is actually how the lower half is built. Over the course of looking through some of the decks, I noticed that there were 2 basic ideas that people were running with. The first one was to cut most of the lower new stuff, the lower black Agumon X Antibody and things like that, and just run the old red package from before. This way your eggs to your level 3s become very consistent, and you still get all the searchability that you would off of the X Antibody Agumon card that already exists as red. The second way that I saw was to forego the red Agumon and solely focus on the black Agumon X Antibody, and then slot in the Bakumon line with the Mako Tamer for really, really fast evolutions from, 3 to 6. Being able to reduce the cost of those Digimon who are 2-colored, one of those colors being black, is really, really strong. And there certainly is a trade-off to running both of these. Of course, running the red line, you're going to have more access to being able to search through cards using the Agumon X Antibody, as well as the other red Agumons who have a lot of searchability as well. Whereas going the all-black route gives you very, very fast Digivolves from 3 to 6, being able to reduce the cost of Digivolutions through the new black-red Greymon X Antibody, as well as the Mako Tamer in itself. And while these are 2 different competing ideas in the meta, I would say that from the results that I saw, red is the one that is eking out more victories. And as you go further down the list, you can see that Crossheart, while down, is not out. It's walking away with at least 7 wins over the course of the week. And then right below that we see Blue Flare, lots of decks that we saw before, right? Blue Flare, we see some Garurumon X Antibody as well, but Ulforce Vidramon sneaking up there with 4 wins, as well as, and super surprise here, Machine Dramon. I didn't really believe in the Machine Dramon build after trying to put together a couple of decks myself, but seems like a lot of people have definitely made it work, and a lot of these decks though are very, very different, so I don't think there's one ideal lineup that's been figured out yet, but I think a lot of people are playing with a lot of stuff and then finding a lot of results in each way they go, right? More interesting here is actually the rookie tier for wins. Bloomlord just kind of, what happened? It's like the change from summer to fall, and Bloomlord literally just falls off in the worst pun possible. Like, things like Grandis are popping back up, Exmon's still down here, Alphamon is still taking wins, which is really strange in my opinion. Even after the nerf there, it seems like people still want to go the X Antibody route. And then out of nowhere, the dark horse for this set, Galacticmon. This is a archetype that I think nobody had any expectations for, actually eking out some wins here in the meta. I ran this deck in my own locals, and I actually found a fair bit more success than I thought I was going to have with it, so there may be something more to this Galacticmon deck than I think that most folks thought when the set was just released. And then taking a look at the last row of decks here that only won a single game during the week here, it definitely tells the tale that a lot of the new decks are underperforming. Things like Bagara Army, Skamon, Mastamon, which is a huge surprise, especially to me. I thought this deck was going to be so much better with the inclusion of the new Mirai Tamer. And then also things like Shadowverse X7. I think that the hardest part about this deck, I don't know if it's good or not yet, but I think the hardest part about it is actually finding the right build for it. And I think that there's so many Crossheart pieces out right now, and the deck itself requires so many pieces to get the X7 out, that folks are really having a tough time to find a fast and viable deck to use for X7. So if there was one deck that I was going to keep my eye on over the next few weeks, it would definitely be this one. I think as we find the more streamlined builds of the deck, we opt to see this deck rise in popularity. It is really sad though. I think that there's a lot of decks that I would have expected to see here, like Marsmon, Phoenixmon, the Digimon, Rust Tyrannomon. Those decks seem pretty powerful in their own right, but not seeing them on the list here either makes me think that folks don't believe in the decks, or they just cannot keep up to the power that is things like, Blue Flare, Bloomlord, Black War Greymon X Antibody, etc. So highlighting a couple of decks that actually topped during the week, I mentioned before that the Black War Greymon line opts to go either a red or black lower half package, and this is an example of what a red lower half package would look like. So you see this Wallet Agumon, the most expensive promo card I think that there is in existence, shows its head again, for better or for worse, which if you have 4 copies or not. And then we see again the red Agumon X Antibody and a couple of the other Searcher Agumons, and then the black Agumon who can come from black red. I think this is what's really important about the fact that he can come from a red level 2, which means that Koromon is on the table, so he's still able to be included. And with the rest of the upper half of this deck, I think it's fine to include him because he can just seamlessly go from level 3 to level 4. If you're running a deck where promo cards are banned, I'm looking at you, Southeast Asia, you can cut this card entirely, and then you can add in a couple more copies of the Searcher Agumon, and then add in another Agumon who gives plus DP on Inheritance. Easy enough, still does the same thing. Probably increases the searchability of the deck, and yeah, you still get most of the effects that you need. Taking a look at the upper half of the deck very quickly, you'll see that this deck includes 2 copies of Gaiomon, which I think is fine. I think decks either include copies of Gaiomon or a couple copies of Omegamon just to get that last swing to close out the game in some cases. But yeah, this is fine as well, right? Having Reboot, Security Attack Plus, yeah, never a bad thing. And then we also see only a couple copies of Yugioh. I think that some people were trying to run 4 copies of this guy. Absolutely not necessary. 2 or 3 copies is fine. Being able to buff up one of your Digimon and give them nearly unkillable status for a turn is good. You don't want to have too many of these in your hand and they end up bricking, right? So I mentioned just a moment ago that I really think that the thing that holds the Crossheart X7 deck back is its ability to find a consistent build for the deck. And after looking at the results, I thought that this one was really good, so I thought I would share it here. Just seeing a couple of copies of the new White Tamers with the inclusion of the old Red, Yellow, Green, a couple copies of the Z Greymon, as well as the Omega Shoutmon for some control on board. Whereas you notice that they don't have the Sunrise Buster that the deck was so reliant on before. They use a couple of copies here of the Burning Star Crusher, which is interesting. Again, with Omega Shoutmon, I think it's not a bad amount of removal to have, so it's pretty good in my opinion. And then you see that they've got like most of the other Crossheart pieces that we've seen before that go into the Shoutmon X7 with a couple copies of new cards like the Cutemon, as well as the Shoutmon, I believe this is X3, and then finally the Shoutmon plus Star Sword. I'm definitely going to give this deck a try myself this week, and when I do, I think this is the first build I'm going to go for, something similar to this, and then see what I can do from there, maybe switch up a couple cards to maybe find a more optimal version of the list. And so taking a look at the last deck that I want to highlight for this week is going to be Blue Flare. There definitely has been a general theme of, instead of building an entirely new deck from the new cards for the new set, I think I'm going to take one of my old decks and then use a few cards from the new set to buff them up. And this is exactly what we see in the Blue Flare deck now. So we see a couple of copies of the new Dracomon, as well as the new Vmon. This one's really surprising to me. I'd be interested to see how this works out, but being able to search for Digimon and a Tamer is kind of nice. Additionally, we see on the top end of this deck, we've got the new Metal Greymon plus Cyber Launcher, which honestly is a much better card than I really gave it credit for to begin with. It gives you basically the ability to put another male Birdramon or Greymon up underneath your Digimon so that you can get multiple swings. And then it gives you another form of Armor Purge, which basically gives you 2 levels of Armor Purge to go through on a Digimon, which guarantees it to have nearly 3 swings if it keeps swinging entirely for their turn. We also see a couple copies of the new Z Greymon, who, while again being useful for this deck, he's just a cheap evolution from level 5 to level 6, where if you can't go into your Metal Greymon plus Cyber Launcher, you can go into the Z Greymon instead for really, really cheap, or you can put him up under something and get that Digimon blocker. And then finally we see the eggs have been changed up a little bit, just so we got the new copies of Wanyamon as well. So again, taking the idea of, instead of just building an entirely new deck, taking something that I know is going to be useful, or know is going to be good in the meta, and then just buffing it up even more with some of the new cards is definitely the strategy that I think a lot of folks are going with. And so that's going to be the Week 1 meta recap for the Japanese version of Digimon TCG for the BT11 Dimensional Phase set. So in the comments below before I get out of here, let me know, what are your thoughts? Are you surprised by the results? Are you happy that Crossheart is finally getting checked by something else? Are you kind of sad to see Blue Lord go? What are your thoughts? Do you think that some decks become more powerful, or we'll see more representation from those decks as the weeks go on? And how do you feel overall about the general lack of inclusion of a lot of the BT11 decks outside of, Black War Greymon X? Anyway, folks, I'm going to get out of here. Do me a favor, before you get out of here, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.